Hello and welcome to this video. This is round 5 of the London Chess Classic, as I was told. It's not the classics for some reason, it's the Chess Classic. Okay, let's get going for round 5. Starting with Aronian against Carlsen. And we got no Berlin defense. That's good. So Aronian goes for 1c4, as he does quite frequently these days. And Carlsen goes for this defense, the symmetrical, with an early knight to f6. And what he is after, it seems, is the hedgehog. Like it could happen after these moves. This is something that Carlsen has played over the years quite often. But Aronian decides to go e3, something entirely different. Yeah, g3 is a more principled move, but e3 is a pretty decent way to get something different than the hedgehog. Yeah, Carlsen goes for quick d5, very logical, striking in the center. Takes, knight takes, and d4. Yeah, if black would have taken with the pawn, he would have gotten an isolated queen pawn position. That definitely is okay for black. But Carlsen is after something else. Knight d5. Yeah, now Aronian goes d4. And here it is white who gets an isolated queen pawn. It's quite interesting how move orders and transpositions work in chess. This position is most of the time reached via something entirely different. Let's just go back for a moment. Yes, that's a Caruana Panov, and okay. Yeah, well, we would need to do it like that to get exactly the same position. Yeah, so it can happen from completely different move orders, and this is the same position. Yeah, here the normal move would be bishop e7, knight c6, or bishop b4, one of those. But Carlsen has a surprise in store. Traded on c3 and played queen to d7. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. He has a real boatload of slightly obscure lines. Obscure is wrong. I mean, it's not a bad line. It's just that it's virtually unknown, and it is completely playable. Of those kind of lines in store, yeah, to get fresh positions in games and avoid specific preparation. Okay, this is hanging, and Aronian gets to cover it. Knight d7, looking to cover e5, bishop d3, and now b6. Yeah, black wants to play bishop to b7, possibly bishop d6, and then castle. Yeah, interesting move now by Aronian. He goes knight g5. I think that's a good idea, trying to get some kind of initiative out of that. If black gets simply to develop bishop b7 and bishop d6, I think he has equalized already. And here it gets more interesting. White is simply threatening that pawn, and in some cases to get the queen out. Yeah, so knight f6 was played, covering h7 and bringing the knight over so that there is no queen coming to those squares. Queen f3 now, however. Interesting move. Bishop b7 is now no good due to the check. And the king has to move, which is yeah, something that black definitely wants to avoid. Yeah, something like that.
Check.
Is to be avoided. Rook b8 has to be played. Yeah, so is white better here? It seems that he's got better development, but it seems that black is completely okay because he gains tempi by the next moves. Castles, bishop d6. This is a tempo on the pawn, and white has to do something about it. He goes queen h3. That makes lots of sense. Not playing something like h3, which would be really lame. This is better, looking at that pawn here on h7 and preventing castling for the moment. Yeah, Carlsen played h6, preparing to castle. And now it's important moment here in this game. What should Aronian do? It seems that after the game he said that he could have gone f4 in this position, and this is a lot sharper. That's definitely true. I mean, black is not attacking this. h6 is mostly a prep move for castling. Yeah, he could have played f4, but I'm absolutely unsure if this is that brilliant. I mean, if black just castles, is that so bad? I mean, white has to go back now to e4 or to f3. And in both cases, I don't see anything terrible happening to black. Let's see, it goes here. There's e5. That's all right. Bad. So he has to go to e4, actually. Yeah, and now if black, let's say, trades and plays, I don't know, bishop a6. Something like that. I don't think that is so bad for black. He's got very decent counter chances. And note that there is also the idea that black is simply pushing this. Yeah, you have to be without prejudices about the e6 pawn. Yeah, that pawn looks bad, but this bishop also looks bad. And with f5, it's the end of all kind of attacking ideas. Yeah, if black gets in this, for example, he's perfectly fine. So I think f4 was more aggressive, maybe, but if it's better, unsure. It's clear, however, that this is how it was played, and after bishop f4, Carlsen has no problems whatsoever. Why bishop f4? Because bishop takes h6 is something that can be troublesome, and if you trade the bishops here, and this is what happened, black has accomplished two things. He avoided any sacrifices on h6, and the second effect is that now this knight has gained enormous stability. Yeah, it cannot be disturbed anymore by a bishop coming to e5, for example, that it might threaten to take the knight and to damage the pawn structure. On f6, that knight is just sitting there like a rock and protects important squares. It's an important device, trading bishops sometimes to ensure that your knights have more stability. For example, that knight is not very stable, as it can always be attacked by the bishop. And I mean, here white has no problem with putting it on e5, but it's just that f3 is not a very stable square for that piece. Yeah, I think that here black shouldn't have any problems. And after the queen trade, it became clear that there is not that much that both sides can hope for. White has the hanging pawns, and if the position lacks dynamism, if it lacks dynamic play, then often the pawns are more of a weakness than a strength. Here, however, he has easy ways to cover them, and it's just an equal position. Everything else would be exaggerating or false information. It's just equal. Yeah, Aronian tried with d5 breaking through, but black is immensely solid.
Check.
Now got it traded down to rook endgame, and after rook a5 we see, painting wrong, that there is the a pawn to worry about, and here they agreed to a draw. It was a very sound, solid game by both sides. Yeah, it's sometimes not so easy to say what about this kind of draw. I mean, it's not very exciting, but what happened here? I mean, okay, e3 is an interesting sideline, and it can lead to sharp play in the isolated queen pawn position. So Aronian is not to be blamed also for that decision. But if we look at this, for example, white can also play something like this, where he goes with e4 and d4 and goes for some kind of attack. I mean, it's a bit tame how this was played, maybe on the white side. Okay, so let's go to the next game, Adams Nakamura, and yes, what can we do? It's that dreaded opening again. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think probably half of the overall games of that event was the Berlin defense, and yeah, I don't quite understand why white players still go for it. But anyway, well, in Adams' case, it's a thing. I mean, he's a lifelong 1e4 player, and he very rarely has played anything else. So it's a bit difficult for him to do something else, but for many others, I'm not quite sure why they keep playing into the bullion. Okay, anyway, we have d3 now, bishop c5, takes, knight d2, knight d7, knight c4. We've seen something similar many times. Again, I can tell you that white cannot take the pawn. Yeah, double attacking. So bishop d2, rook e8, f6, knight f8. Yeah, so here's something is that should be said. What is black doing here? One idea that black sometimes has is that he tries to put the knight on one of those squares, and he also of course had to free the bishop on c8. This is Nakamura's choice. I think black has a very again sound, solid position, and white has little to play for. I don't really quite see what white players see in this kind of thing, because there's just nothing going on. Yeah, so h6 was played, g6, and now castles. Yeah, an interesting way of playing. First push the h-pawn up the board and then castles. I was pretty surprised when I saw that, because well, I couldn't really see how that h-pawn push relates to white castling short. One thing though, black is immediately now trying to go for that pawn. It's funny, he definitely managed to get it, yeah? Knight d4, getting to the queen trade, and now after this, that pawn was in the way isolated from white's army. Bishop e3 and back, and then it's gone, yeah? White could not keep it. If he goes here, okay, that he maybe could have tried, but okay, black can still go here and pick it up with bishop f8 to h6. The thing is, in the game, white also lost their pawn, but if you look at this position, this is the worst bishop ever. Well, almost not the worst ever, but it's pretty bad, and white has excellent control over the squares f5 and h5. Plus we have the queenside situation, where with that pawn, you know that black is never going to get a passer in any kind of form. Yeah, those two squares. This is a very solid blockading position. Yeah, white shouldn't blunder stuff, check, of course. He went f4. I think white simply has full compensation for the pawn. I mean, it's not a compensation like an attacking compensation, but white is definitely active enough and placed well enough to easily hold. Yeah, black never gets to some kind of state where he can think about converting the pawn. It just doesn't happen. Also, sometimes if we look at a position, it's useful to think about it in terms what exactly is the extra pawn. I mean, here black's extra pawn is arguably c7, and this is not very useful in this position. I mean, if we would have this position without that pawn, I mean, just imagine it without the pawn, then we would rather be white in this position, I think, yeah, because h6 is a little bit weak, d4 is a little bit weak, and so on. And there's simply no reason whatsoever for black to hope for something. Of course he tried, yeah, that's very clear. I mean, we have some more moves, but there is no headway to be made here. Now I got this in, white rooks get active, and well, there are still those plenty pawn weaknesses.
Check.
Yeah, this was the next stage in this game, but this is lost. Yeah, this is a lost pawn. White was getting into the king and pawn endgame rather quickly. Yeah, well, here what is there? This is hanging, and also what is black supposed to do? Something like this. He might even lose that game. Yeah?
Check.
This is coming up, rook to b5. Black cannot win this. It's a bit strange that concept out of the opening, I think, to push the h-pawn up the board and then to castle short. But maybe white is shooting for something like moving that knight and playing for some kind of f4. f6 has been weakened. But okay, this is a very sound approach. Here we get to that endgame, and I think it's just very, very drawish. And at the end it was a draw. Okay, so let's go for the next game. And yeah, the Berlin quota is very high. We've got it again. Okay, this time we have a line like that, and Grischuk goes bishop e6. Yeah, this is probably played to prevent knight c4, early knight c4. It doesn't change much in terms of the structure. It's still a fairly yeah, sound, solid, slightly boring structure. d4 now by Caruana. That's interesting. He opens up the position now. Yeah, because of that idea, black cannot take, and goes knight d7. The interesting moment is a little bit later. Here we have this change to a pawn structure that is well known from the Ruhr-Lopez exchange. Black has got the two bishops as compensation for that slightly devalued pawn structure. He's this 4 against 3 here. 4 against 3 are not that valuable. It's difficult to get a passer, while white has 4 against 3, 4 healthy pawns against 3 healthy pawns. So white in some way has a, yeah, it's not like a material advantage, but his pawns are a little bit more valuable, let's say. On the other hand, black has got the bishop pair. The interesting moment comes here. Got the check. Now f5. That was a surprising decision. At least for me, it was a surprising decision by Grischuk, that he goes for that blockading setup, accepting that
check.
We had this inserted, that white gets this protected passer. The pawn itself is not, yeah, it's not like white is going to do something with it quickly, but long term this will still be an issue. I mean, black has, I think, very, very good chances to hold the position, but it feels like a somewhat tedious affair, always just being able, I mean, to defend. It's a purely defensive task. Caruana is doing a good job here. He trades off the bishop. And the thing is, in this position, black basically has to stay. Just like that. Queen here, blocking that pawn and do nothing. And in the actual game, there is one moment where he basically, yeah, loses this this kind of setup. Yeah, here it's still on e6. This b6. So it's one particular moment. Here, queen to d1. This is the thing. In this position here, instead of queen d1, he yeah, he had to yeah, stay put. Again, do this and shuffle between those squares and just do a sit and wait strategy. I think that white after this has very little chances of breaking through. He can try, but it's yeah, it's difficult. White's bishop is not that great, and this is the thing. In the game,
check.
This happened, of course, and now queen and bishop invade with great effect.
Check. Check.
It's not better. Yeah, we have this. Note that white's king is perfectly safe. Bishop e7, queen g6. Yeah, and that doesn't look good, right? f5 hangs, h5 hangs. Yeah, it's a very clear affair now. White is a pawn up and has the clearly better position with black's king being out in the open. The only thing that still worries is, of course, those ideas at perpetuals.
Check.
So white got in a couple of checks.
Check.
And right here, we have the mysterious moment of the game. You can treat this as a little exercise and probably will manage to play better than Caruana did. White to play and win. Yeah, I'll give you 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Queen G6 and black resigns, right? No, that wasn't played. Quite amazingly, this is just completely over, threatening bishop g7 and end of game. It also covers his square, which is crucial. It's very mysterious why Caruana didn't go for that. He had time enough, and it's a very logical move. Yeah, this is the threat here. We have to think about this, cover that square. So Queen g6 is supernatural, and it has this idea. I think it's very comforting to see that even such genius players like Caruana, that they sometimes have their moments of complete blindness. Yeah, Queen g6 and black can safely resign. Yeah, I think I saw one tweet that Grischuk was asked by Jan Gustafsson in the press conference or in the after game interview how he could keep a poker face while waiting for Queen g6 to happen, and Grischuk said, "I just didn't see it." In his typical style.
Check.
Yeah. Anyway, so white is trying with something different, but the thing is that the white king position is just so bad. If you look at this with the computer will still give white a very big advantage, but ultimately, especially for a human player, this kind of king position is impossible to manage. And around here, even the engine agrees that it is a draw. It's it's a moot point trying to find improvements here for white. It's very difficult for a human anyway, and sometimes even the engines cannot easily be trusted here because they easily get out of their horizons, the depth that they can calculate because of white being able to give a ton of checks. So the computer very often will give like +1 point something because it sees that white can continue forever with checks, yeah, and kind of drag the whole thing with the being a pawn up and having a nice position, all nice and good. But the computer does not see any substantial progress how to avoid the actual draw at the end that black is also trying to get with this perpetual chances like this and this. So at the end, I think I skipped a couple of moves.
Check.
It was a draw at the end. Yeah, perpetual here. White giving the checks. Yeah, it was a draw, and of course very lucky at one moment. Caruana had this Queen g6 shot, but he didn't find it. Yeah, the draw rate in this event is very high, but we shouldn't forget that it was not. There weren't lots of ultra boring short draws, but there were also in fact quite a number of games where one side had excellent winning chances, but they simply spoiled it because of various things. Like here, this Queen g6 is really mysterious. I think Caruana would play that in most blitz games even, and somehow he didn't see it here. Okay, so let's go for the third Berlin. Yeah, we've got a third one. I don't know. I don't understand why. Isn't there something slightly different that you can try? Okay, anyway.
Check.
I mean, is the French defense so bad, or the Caruana or something like that? Okay, so we have this now, bishop f4, bishop e7, and one of the main lines, as far as I know, with this rook h6 move. Yeah, black activates the rook in that way. That position, I think, was also discussed in the World Championship matches between Carlsen and Anand. We will go a little bit further up to a particular position because there is a novelty.
Check.
That has all been played before. Up to here. And this was the game Adams-Kramnik from London last year, where ultimately Kramnik could not completely equalize. I mean, okay, he tried to do something, it didn't work. At the end, it was a draw. The thing is that here Giri now comes up with a novelty, yeah, and it's not move 19 in the Berlin. So, and it's this move. That's quite funny, right? After c4, you would pretty much assume that that bishop has to move, but that's not the case. Black rather goes for a possible check here, and yeah, it's really a funny move. MVL at the end decided to take. He took a long time, but there is no great alternative there, funny enough. I mean, those knights, they both cannot move, and what is white supposed to play if not taking? If you move here, black is going
check
with knight f3 check, and this cannot be anything great for white at all. Yeah, so he decided to take, and now Giri just recaptures, and it seems that this ends all hopes for a white advantage. Black is now intending to take here, and well, you cannot move any of the knights. Yeah, then you, okay, white moved the knight from e4. He gave the check on d6, but you cannot just go somewhere. You have to play this knight d6 check. It seems to be the only continuation that makes any sense. If white goes back here, black is just taking this and is better. Yeah, this. Sorry, check. And white is lost. He has to do this.
Check.
Knight d6.
Check.
Check. Knight e6 back. And the funny thing is that currently this is more a weakness than a strength. Knight f3. Bishop f6 activates that. King d7. And rook h6. Yeah, to get the rook back.
Check. Check. Check.
And you guessed it, they repeat it here for a draw. Yeah, that is one of those cases where you feel like, okay, was that a real game of chess? Giri played complete out of his preparation up to the end of the game, I guess. Okay, he took 30 minutes to recheck and so on, and it's but it's clear that up to knight d4 it was all prep. Yeah, here knight d4 was of course not devised over the board, but was prepared, and he had no problems whatsoever. So this is in a way, from a chess professional point of view, a good game, because it's a good preparation. You get it in, you get a draw with black, just not very attractive to watch. Yeah, that's how it is with those openings. Yeah, sometimes if you think about this kind of tournament format, sometimes those alternative formats like that, knockouts with some rapid games, they are more spectacular to watch, clearly. On the other hand, it's difficult to just yeah, scrap all those longer time control games, because it's also, yeah, the more from pure quality point of view, the better chess. It's just that sometimes you feel like if you have more than 50% of the games are Berlin defenses and you have the same kind of positions all the time, it just feels a bit stale. Okay, so let's go for the next game, a final game that we look at in this round, Anand Topalov. And the good thing is that Topalov is providing some variety. as he plays the knight off. Yeah, we got the knight off. It's interesting that Vichy also has gone back to e4 mostly. He had a very good run in early 2015 playing d4, where he had fantastic results. But now he's back to more of 1e4. He's mixing it a little bit, of course. Yeah, he played c4 against... we played c4 against Adams, right? Yeah, in the first round. But most of the time he goes for 1e4. Yeah, and we have h3 again, the new main line of the knight off, maybe. Yeah, and Topalov is sticking to this defense, the line that he already had played against MVL and lost. Yeah, Anand now plays differently, entirely differently. Maxime went for g3 here, yeah, for this fianchetto or fianchetto. But bishop g5 now played by Anand. This is of course also a quite logical continuation. White is immediately liquidating that knight for his bishop, and now has the situation that he's got 3 pieces that may compete for the d5 square, whereas black only has 2 pieces to defend it. This is a typical scenario in those Sicilian positions where the d5 square has been weakened, like the Sveshnikov, Kalashnikov. There are various lines like that. The ideal scenario is for white to trade the knight and the bishop here, those 4, trade those, and then get a knight on d5. Wow, I'm painting badly. Getting the knight to d5, that is completely unopposed. That's the meta strategy, let's say, that white has. And keep that in mind while watching the game. Knight d5. Black does not want to trade. As I said, he doesn't want to trade those. Knight, queen d3, and white went for long castles. Knight d7, king b1, rook c8, all very standard stuff. Rook c5, looking at that crucial d5 square. Bishop e2, all very normal looking moves. I think we don't have to address them in much detail. a3, guarding against possible b4s, and knight b6. It's an interesting choice. In general, as I said, black does not want to trade, but it's a bit difficult to play around that knight the whole time. The thing is that if white now takes on b6 and queen takes, it is very difficult now to rearrange those pieces in a decent way. You don't want to play knight d5, as after the capture this is replaced by a pawn, and this doesn't really help white at all if a pawn gets to d5. We had a similar situation in the MVL Topalov game, but there the white player had castle short, and then you could go a4 and play on the queen side. Here, of course, with long castles, this doesn't make any sense at all. Black here just will activate his bishop somewhere here, or on bishop g7 with a possible e4. The black bishop is rather better than the white bishop. So this was no good. I mean, still Anand could have played that. It leads to a very similar position in the game. g4 here, takes, and now he took. So he could have maybe taken immediately and then go g4. Interesting thing here is that white took with the pawn. I was originally thinking that bishop takes is interesting, trying to tempt black into that structure, which would be really terrible. But black, of course, is not doing that. He will go here. And then it's not clear that you have gained from taking with the bishop. So Anand took with the pawn. And those were traded. Bishop g7. Yeah, and now it's an interesting moment here in the game in terms of finding a plan. As I said, what white is trying to do is he wants to trade those bishops if possible. If he can trade e2 and e6, then d5 will be free for the knight to occupy, and yeah, cannot be challenged anymore, that piece, by that bishop on g7. If you are a regular viewer of my channel, you might have seen a video that I once made on the middle game planning, and it was called the Eternal Knight from a game of Fischer's against a not so well-known player, Gardia, where Fischer managed exactly that, establish a knight on d5 against a bad bishop. And this is what Anand's idea is now. So how do you trade those bishops? That's how. Yeah, up to g5 with the pawn, and now angle for that bishop g4. Of course, you can argue black can go to c4, but that's not so easy to do. This happened now, queen g3, and this way it can never go to c4. But if black played it differently, he also would have to reckon with b3. So any bishop c4 under other circumstances. I mean, here just the queen hangs, so he cannot move at all. But then b3 would have been a problem. So here Anand gets to get to the scenario that I mentioned. The knight on d5 against that awkward bishop on f8. Still, there's one particular feature of this position that points towards black having better chances to hold than under other circumstances. And this particular feature is the pawn on g5. The pawn on g5 is a clear weakness here on white's part. It cannot easily be supported by f4. I mean, it can, but black just takes it. And then you haven't made any kind of gains there. The pawn is still, let's say, a little bit alone. And if black gets his bishop somewhere here, which he will, that's the most logical place for it anyway, then white has to constantly worry about that pawn. This position, if white's pawn would be back on g4, yeah, that's just if you just imagine this, pawn, let's say rook is back on g1 and pawn would be on g4, yeah, then white's position would be strategically close to winning, because he has all those advantages of the great knight against the awful bishop, and he can easily play on the queen side. Just imagine, we would see how the game unfolds without white having to worry about the pawn. This way, however, it is not easy at all for white to make substantial progress. We see that Anand does all the normal things. He brings his king up and sets that pawn lever into motion. That's how you do it. The b5 pawn is good to attack. Here black only has a choice between various evils. He can allow white to take on b5, then the b5 pawn is weak, or you can take, and he decided to take.
Check.
Sorry, now we get this structure. I'm sorry, he decided to recapture with the rook and allow that structure with a and b pawn, with a pawn against b and c pawn. Yeah, white now has this b4 idea, and we see that white gets a passer in this way. If you just imagine this position with the pawn back on g4 and the white rook free to move, you see how great it is. Yeah, white can invade on the queen side, and yeah, it's just a lot better. Anand played that very nicely though now. First he did all the normal things, shuffling to get to move 40, and now he simply ditched that pawn. Yeah, just gave away the g5 pawn. And this shows how, I mean, and white gets very, very good compensation for the pawn. And his position is so good that he can allow to give it away. The thing is that without this, yeah, white would have been probably winning if the pawn is back on g4. Yeah, so Topalov took it, of course. And the question is this just a fantastic compensation, or is white, should white win this? It's hard to determine actually. There is one particular moment, and this is here, where the engine claims that black is able to draw with g4. I'm not entirely sure about this, because black's position still looks yeah, very threatened. Yeah, after rook h8, I mean, black cannot do that much. The engine's line is this. I can show you what it gives. Rook b8, here, check, king away, and then rook c1. And I'm inclined to believe that this is indeed a draw, to be honest. The thing is that if white is taking the pawn, black is starting with checks, and it's hard for white to avoid, yeah, because we cannot do this because of bishop a5. I mean, it doesn't lose, but it doesn't help. And what is white supposed to do if he goes over there? Black is continuing with checks, or he can do this at one point, where after b6, rook b5, there's also no winning chance whatsoever. Maybe he could have held this with g4. Maybe. I'm not sure. It still looks very, very tricky for black to play. Topalov went rook b8, however.
Check.
And after rook h7 check, it seems to be very, very difficult to save. Here, yeah, and now, I mean, black's position is entirely dominated. He cannot move his bishop, for example, to any decent square. The only thing that he could come up with is push the g-pawn, but it is ultimately lost. Now we get to the position that I described earlier a little bit. Yeah, white just having all his trumps without having to worry about being a pawn down. And this position seems to be winning for white. There were a couple of funny little moments, but nothing too substantial, I believe.
Check. Check.
Yeah, white can take his time. This is the funny moment.
Check.
That's not a blunder. The idea is that if white takes it, and Anand could have done that. He could have taken. We can look at this. The idea was here
Check.
for
Stalemate.
Yep. But white, of course, doesn't have to take. After king a4, he still would have had a winning position. Point
Check.
is that
Check.
black can give a couple of checks,
Check.
but it ends right here with the white knight being able to retreat. White wins pretty easily. So Anand could have taken the bishop, but he preferred to just keep the position as is and continue like that.
Check.
And I think it should win as well. I mean, white's position is just far too
Check.
dominating for black to
Check.
hold it. Yeah, and now the b pawn is decisive.
Check.
Yeah, Topalov
Check.
tried some desperate
Check.
sacrifice.
Check. Check. Check.
Yeah, and that's it. The e4 pawn is covered, and white next will come up here and start picking up pawns. So a win for Anand in this game. So what does that mean for the overall standings? Topalov is clear last with 3 losses and 2 draws. Pretty awful tournament. 1 point out of 5. And this loss definitely means that he's entirely out of any run in the overall standings of the Grand Chess Tour. Anand with that win goes back to 50% after he had lost to Nakamura in the previous round. That means that the overall standings are quite funny. Topalov is on -3, then half of the field has got 50%, and we've got 3 people with +1, Giri, Nakamura, and MVL. So a funny standing. That means that what we knew before the event, that almost anybody can win it, is still true. Yeah, most of the field is still in competition for the first place, and that nets so many points that it's possible for all of them to win the event. Yeah, as I said, a huge draw rate. I think that even though we've got many Berlin defenses, some of them were interesting, but some of them clearly not. So I hope for some other openings. It's really weird. We've got 20. I'm sorry, no, we've got 25. Yeah, 25 games in, and I think more than half of them were Berlins. So why not go for something else? There's also, I don't know, the Scotch opening, if you want to start with e4, e5 in the first place. Okay, we've got a rest day on Wednesday. The tournament continues on Thursday with round 6. I'll be online actually for round 6 for the ICC. I'm doing live commentary together with Grandmaster Joe Benjamin. Very much looking forward to that. And of course, I'll also be covering this round as a recap for my channel. We'll probably be on early Friday, Central European time. It's not feasible to do it right after the coverage on the Thursday. Because it's a super great thing to do. Yeah, those 5-hour coverages live for the events, but it's afterwards you're just feeling like you're completely dead. Yeah, it's just totally exhausting. Okay, I hope you enjoyed round 5 coverage here. Thanks for watching.